Hey guys, how's it going? Today I'll be finishing explaining the lore of the Bond CEs with the extra classes. Let's get to it. Jean's is her divine revelation to save the people of France. Joan of Arc is one of the most compelling and bizarre people to exist ever. People can make arguments as to whether or not she actually heard the voice of God or if she was a good commander all they want, but the historical record from both sides agree that she was weird. There is a list of revelations that she attributed to the voice of God, one very famously being that she went to a church and essentially said, "I'm getting my sword," and found an ancient sacred sword that had been there for centuries that there was no way that she could have ever known about. She was weird enough to have actual people of the cloth scared of her revelations. The flag of Amakusa Shiro is a real relic that exists today. This was his personal banner that read, "Praise be to the most holy sacrament." Other posters of this ilk were placed around Hojo Castle that he and his group of rebelling Christians had taken over from the shogunate in hopes of raising morale. Jacob's limbs are in reference to the leader of the Israelites, Jacob. Jacob is a fairly prominent figure in the Old Testament, and quite frankly, I don't have the time to get into his various exploits, so let's talk about why he is anti-divine, demon, and undead. This is because during his journey home from Canaan, he set up camp along a river. Suddenly a man, in quotes, came to him and the pair wrestled. Jacob held his own against the man until sunrise when the fighting stopped. The man, who was actually an angel, refused to give Jacob his identity, but instead gave Jacob a new name, Israel, which would forever after be the name of his people. This battling with the divine entity by the waterside is what gives these sacred arms their power. Sherlock Holmes' prized violin, a Stradivarius. These violins and other stringed instruments of the sort are more akin to modern mythological items. Supposedly, they are able to produce a more beautiful sound than any other stringed instrument and are widely acclaimed for their craftsmanship. In modern times, people claim they sound identical to other high-grade violins, yet this doesn't diminish the value of the name of the craftsman. As to why this is associated with Holmes, I am not familiar enough with every Sherlock story to say what brand he uses, but the anecdote is that he found it in a pawn shop only recognized by his analytical eye for its true value, making for a sweet little tale. While the Epang Palace is a real place, that is not what is being referred to here. I think an aspect of Lostbelt 3 that is oft forgotten is that Shi Huangdi's true body is the palace. Over the course of the 2,000 some years it took to conquer the Earth, he sacrificed his human form and evolved into something more. His form, a perfect human, made into a miniature form, is presented to us as a gift now that he acknowledges us as equals. This is not meant to be an act of intimidation, but rather one where he wants us to remember how hard that he had worked. Also, never forget that this Qin Shi Huang walked to Chaldea through the Lostbelt because he is literally that guy. I love that they called this the feathered serpent and then give us a featherless dinosaur, and yes, I know they're actually called pterosaurs, nerd. The association with this particular fossilized friend is that they share the same name as the ancient god, being called Quetzalcoatlus. As to their association with Christmas, how about shut up? Much of Estraya's design in FGO is taken from two places, Tarot and Lady Justice. Both portray a woman holding a scale to weigh the heaviness of one's sins, and a sword to symbolize how punishment can be final. In actuality, the scale motif goes all the way back to ancient Egyptian mythology, with the weight of one's heart being weighed against the feather of truth. Roulette is my personal favorite form of gambling that isn't gacha, but that is aside from the point. It was believed to be first invented in the 18th century by the French and gained popularity near the end of the century. The idea behind the game is guess where the ball on the spinning wheel will land, and place bets on where it will go. Theoretically, this is one of the most fair forms of gambling, with outside interference being difficult to hide, and the excitement of watching the ball spin around gets the blood pumping. Yes, I know this is actually a game that can be rigged in the modern day. The fact that it is shaped like the round table for the CE is irrelevant. The favored mirror of the first Queen of Japan. According to the description, this mirror was a gift from her brother who was forgotten by history and serves as a way for her to remember him. Interestingly enough, it's recorded that he was her only male attendant after she became queen and acted as her direct emissary. The relevance of mirrors in Shintoism is fairly large. For one, a mirror is labeled among the sacred treasures of Japan. For two, they are treated as stand-ins for the gods, as was decreed by the sun goddess Amaterasu. There's also the belief that mirrors are sacred because they only reflect the truth. They are incapable of hiding imperfections and simply reflect what is before them. This CE is a direct reference to the end of Hollow Ataraxia, which makes no sense because this rendition of Karen is one that has supposedly not met Avenger. I'm not going to spoil the ending for a visual novel, but this CE makes no sense in the context. If you could believe it, summer CEs still have no bearing on reality, and the vast majority of them can simply be summed up by saying, well, that was a great summer. This one is no different, but the description describes the dinos there as plushies, but they look extremely like robots, which just throws me through a loop. Also, RIP Steggy. I shit you not, this is an explanation from young Moriarty on why math is actually evil. Math has been described as its own language and a universal one at that. It is for this reason why on the Voyager probe there is an equation to solve how to use the golden disk, because in theory math is concrete throughout the universe and any advanced enough species should be able to figure it out. For this, math can be viewed as good, but Moriarty wants us to know that math is actually something vile because subtraction indicates loss in equations when using the lives of others results in negative consequences. I still can't do long division, so this is completely lost on me. A pair of wedding rings fit for both a giant and a mortal. Given that I am unfamiliar with Summer Scotty's event because I was moving at the time of its release, I don't know Scotty's aspirations to marry in that tale. I can say though that the rings themselves are made for a giant man who wishes to marry a mortal woman and vice versa, so let's not forget that before she was a goddess, Scotty was a giant. Magatamas are sacred objects in Japan, being listed among the 3 treasures as the jewel. By the way, if you bond 10 Himiko, Io, and Ibuki, you will have all 3 sacred treasures, which is actually pretty neat. The relevance of the Magatama to Io is that after the death of Himiko, Io, at the age of 13, inherited the kingdom and was sent 5,000 white Magatamas and 2 jade Magatamas. The lore of this particular Bansi is all a fake creation from what I'm finding, but the idea of her being cursed with a corrupted sacred object is interesting. Io is a difficult enough person to research that adding the little tidbits like this is just kind of fun. A diary given to us by the Popist Johanna filled with her thoughts of her life in Chaldea. This one is very reminiscent of George's in that it was made as a way for us to remember the servant by even after our journey has come to an end. The difference between this one and George's that gives it more impact comes with the knowledge that the records of the Popists are nearly non-existent, and the ones that do exist were either destroyed or faked. Historically, it doesn't line up for there to have been a female pope, but the addition of anti-female pope countermeasures after a certain time lends a granule of credence to these theories, but not much. So, this is her attempt at proving to not the world, but to us that she did exist, and that we should remember her. With the coming of the summer holiday, Melusine has shown her true colors. During the events of Summer 8, a race between us and Melusine takes place, where we ultimately defeat her. However, the implications here are that in a separate loop, she managed to snag a trophy herself. That said, she doesn't particularly care for it, and rather wants what she considers the real prize, i.e. Gudako. Uesugi Kenshin is somewhat odd, falling into the common theme of Guda rambling with the intention of feeling historically relevant. This CE mostly seems to serve as an act of pondering her existence as a quote-unquote god of war, and whether or not her strength comes from the possession, or if it's herself that allows the possession to be strong in the first place. Chateau d'If is a real prison fortress on an island found in Marseille, France. In the novel The Count of Monte Cristo, this is where Dantes was held for 14 years before he escaped, and learned a great deal from a priest who was also held there. Much of this information is what would later assist Dantes in enacting his revenge. The death of Joan of Arc forever immortalized into the walking charred demon that is Jalter. The martyrdom performed on a young saint now is able to be inflicted upon others with gross impunity by her darkened reflection. The last splinter is in reference to 2 things. The flower is a hortensia flower, and the last splinter naming refers to his mental state. This Angra, mind you, is not the real one, but rather a scapegoat. A normal man taken by his people and turned into a sacrificial lamb of all the world's evil. The love that was given to him by a single hortensia is what keeps him from truly forgetting who he is. Chrysaor is the name of the Gorgon's lesser-known child and brother to the Pegasus. Both he and Pegasus are considered to be the children of Poseidon after he defiled Medusa, but both were only born after Medusa herself was decapitated. Chrysaor has a few myths relating to him and is most famous for fathering monsters with an oceanid. Lobo was considered to be impossible to kill because he was far too smart for normal traps and poisons, and too powerful to be killed with a firearm. However, his mate, the wife wolf Blanca, was not on the same level. As such, Seton and others who were tasked with dealing with Lobo opted to kill the mate to draw out the king. They managed to do this, and it was said that upon finding his partner dead, Lobo himself lost the will to resist. While Salieri and Mozart certainly were not on friendly terms during their lives, the notion that Salieri killed Mozart sprung up decades after Mozart's death. The popularization of this theory in modern times can very likely be attributed to the pair's portrayal in the film Amadeus, so a realistic wildfire-like hatred from one another is simply untrue. If anything, Mozart hated Salieri, who tried to keep him down and out of the court life. I feel like Nobu CEs and Summer CEs are in the same vein of being weird. This sword is described as being an amalgamation of every sword Nobunaga owned, waiting on the edges of eternity for her return. It will remain upright for this amount of time until the right time comes, except because it's Nobu related, it immediately immediately falls over after this picture is taken. So this is kind of a cute one. It's Space Ishtar's ship, come back to collect us after the events of Saber Wars 2, because Ishtar needs our help again. The sweet thing about this one is that while the goodbyes we had at the end of Saber Wars 2 seemed fairly final, we can always count on a useless goddess to show up when we least expect her to. Azamaru was the sword of Taira no Kagekyo. Its association with being a cursed item comes from when it was gifted to one of Nobunaga's retainers, Niwa Nagahide. After receiving the sword, Nagahide began developing eye troubles until he was nearly blind. It was believed that the sword was the source of these problems, after which it was donated to a shrine where it remains today. After it was no longer in his possession, his eyes returned to normal. In an attempt to corrupt people with the temptations of summer, food, floaties, drinks, and the sun, it would appear as though Kama herself has fallen into human depravity. This CE gave me brain mold. It's an explanation of how Ranmaru became the #1 Ranmaru on the planet of Ranmarus, where all Ranmarus compete to become the true Ranmaru. Summer Heiress has discovered that her likeness has been stolen and that she has been turned into a marketable plushie, as is the fate of all with fans. Amit is a goddess of the underworld composed of the 3 largest man-eaters of ancient Egypt: the crocodile, the lion, and the hippo. Amit helps to oversee the judgment of the dead, being the one who ultimately disposes of the wicked by devouring their hearts. While I call her a goddess, she was not an object of worship, but rather one that was greatly feared. Should you be deemed unworthy and your heart devoured, you would wander as a soulless husk for all eternity. Also, the flavor text indicates that even though this version of Nito is closer to the god Anubis, she is still a little bit afraid of Ozzy, which is adorable. So as not to linger on anything related to Chloe, her Bonsi is a shared moment between her and Gudako at a poolside. It's implied that Chloe has taken a liking to the master because of her constant hard work and dedication at attempting to meet deadlines. Bibi's Bonsi is a memory of the Moon Cell and her interactions with Hakuno. Spoilers for Fate Extra stuff, this one likens itself to one of the game's endings where Bibi/Sakura saves Hakuno by giving them a body without an illness outside the Moon Cell. I believe that this is the one considered to be the true ending. Unironically, this CE is Bibi killing us. Kind of. It's indicative that Bibi is manipulating reality as she sees fit to keep us perpetually trapped in time and be used as her plaything. It's easy to forget because Bibi is used as a wacky gag character a lot, but she possesses within her the powers of one of the most terrifying outer gods and has morals that are loose at best. A gift from Jinako. The sweets are a reference to Fate Extra, but the Bond CE itself is a reflection of her role in Lostbelt 4, and Ganesha gently explaining that even a shut-in NEET like her is capable of greatness. The Shen is a mythological creature in Japan, Korea, and China that gave off the appearance of cities under the water. Today, it is widely believed that this was caused by optical illusions similar to the Fata Morgana. This is a reference to the temporary conclusion of Ark's story, reminiscing on words said to her by Shiki. And that will be the conclusion of Part 1. Part 2 coming soon. If you're interested, check out the other parts of the series from the Sabers to the Berserkers. For now though, do all the YouTube stuff, check out my Discord, Twitch, and Twitter, but for now, keep your chin up, peace.